If you've got an automatic garage door opener that stopped working, chances are it's the actual drive mechanism. This is an old worn out gear that I just replaced. And this was the issue why my garage door wouldn't go up or down. Symptoms that you might find is, the motor seems to work. It seems to be making noise, maybe a clunking or grinding noise inside, but it appears to sound like something is worn out inside. That's probably the reason why. You're going to need a new part, and the replacement takes all of about 15 minutes to do. Here's how. Step 1. Unplug your garage door opener. There's electricity in there, and you don't want to be getting shocked when you're tearing this thing apart. There's a couple of screws in here. There's a 1/4 inch screw there, another one on the bottom, and a couple up on the side. You can see how that one's sort of backed out. A 1/4 inch nut driver works fine to remove these things. Always put them someplace that you can find them. The front cover, that white plastic, I take that off, and that's my little tray that I put my nuts and bolts and screws and stuff in. Also behind there is the model number that you're going to need to use for when you order your parts. Okay, this particular Craftsman unit here has some part numbers and date codes and things written on the back of it. These are totally useless numbers. You've got to find the actual serial number written somewhere on your garage door opener. This particular model is actually shown on the front of the unit. So we're looking at the front of the unit, or at least the part of the unit that faces the garage door, and you'll see a model number and a serial number. Now I know you can't read these things, they're going to vary based off the garage door opener that you have. The model number is the key thing that you need to have when ordering your parts. What you're going to need, the replacement parts here are obviously a series of gears, worm gear, spur gear, and some nut drivers and some wrenches and other common tools. Nothing real complicated here, just make sure you get the right set of parts for the type of garage door opener that you have. You can take a look at the gears inside, and you notice how that thing is just kind of shredded away, that worm gear that we see in the camera view right now. If you take a look at the actual cover, that's where all those shavings went. Once you get the cover off, you're probably inspecting all these little brackets and wires and clips and switches and freaked out by the amount of stuff that's in here, and how are you ever going to get that gear off of there, the one that you can't see that's behind this this screw gear here. Look at all these shavings here. Things have been worn out. Actually, it's getting this thing off the inside gear is quite simple. Let me show you a couple tricks here. Getting that gear off is actually quite simple. There's a small screw gear here and a little plastic clip. I'll show you how to take that out in just a second. And then you'll see I've already got one screw out here, one screw out there, and one in the back that it's on its way out. See if I can't point to it for you. This guy right in here. Those 3 screws here actually hold this top plate right here that's the chain wheel's hooked to. Once those 3 screws are out and the small gear on the bottom is taken off, this whole thing pops right out. You take the gear off, put the new gear in, replace it, and it's really that easy. First thing is pull this little clip off. Just pops out just like such. Now I actually, before I shot the small clip right here, this footage, I just kind of pushed out with my finger to get a head start on it. But you can see those little teeth there. Once you get those free, it slides right out. Put this little guy here in a place where you can remember, along with the rest of the parts. Next, this little gear, just kind of carefully slide it out and put it where you can remember it. Once that's done, like I mentioned earlier, remove these screws. There's 3 of them. They're 5/16. Back them out, put them where you can find them, and this whole slider unit will just come right out. All right, once those 3 screws are out, this whole sort of gear and shaft will slide right out. I haven't taken the chain off initially, but now obviously I'm going to do that so I can get the rest of this assembly over to the workbench. Okay, in all of about 5 minutes we were able to get this entire assembly out. This kit here contains a brand new gear, some special grease, some bushings, new gear, bearings, washers, and a host of other components, along with the actual worm gear. When this thing spins around, that's what makes it turn. I'm not going to replace this thing here. This is actually in very good shape in my existing unit. I'm not going to replace any of these bearings here. However, inspect yours, make sure that they're in good shape. If they aren't, This kit probably has the components that you need. What we're going to do is we're going to remove one of these pins here. There's one on the bottom, I guess you'd say, and one on the top. You only need to remove the one on the bottom. The gear will slide out. You put the new gear in and you return that pin. Be very careful. You're going to want to grab this thing with vice grips or stick that in a vise. Remember that there's a bearing that goes along here and it has to be very smooth, free of scratches and nicks, otherwise it will wear everything out. So take a lot of caution on how you get that out. Basically what I'm going to do is put this basically in a vise around the plastic gear and take a nail set and a hammer and just kind of carefully pound that thing out. So basically how I've removed this thing is I put open the jaws of the vise just wide enough to hold the pin, took a good screwdriver and a hammer and kind of whacked it, and it came out to the point. Now that the pin is coming out a little bit more, I simply return it, get my little nail set, put it down in that hole, tap it carefully with a hammer to drive the pin out the rest of the way. If you've made it this far, you are home free. Now I've just inserted the pin ever so slightly, as much as I could with my hands. Then I will simply turn it over and carefully press it in. This may damage or at least bend the nylon gear right in this area here a little bit, although I don't really see much damage there, maybe a little flattening, but I don't know how else to get this thing in. So just rip the end off of the grease and kind of inject it down into the threads here. We're going to do the same process for the worm gear, but this gives you the idea that you want to use this grease liberally here. One last step before I insert it is remove all the old gear parts, debris from the garage door opener. I used a compressor and just blew some air in there to get all the junk out of it. Last thing you want to do is get debris inside these threads. If you get sand in there or dirt or anything, it's just going to wear them out that much faster and you'll be doing this all over again. Alright, let's reinstall it. I'll try to describe what I've just done. With the unit out, I put the chain back on, kind of pulled it back and slid this whole unit back down into this bracket here. You can see where the shaft just went into this bracket. That's the bearing there that you may or may not want to replace. You can't see, but I put a ton of grease on this back gear back here. The mounting holes aren't going to line up yet until I kind of move it around, get the screwdriver, the screws up in there and the nut drivers to put them in place. But basically, if you've gotten this far, it's just a matter of putting those 3 screws back in and the gears on the bottom here, and you're really home free. All right, now that all 3 of those screws are in, put the top cap back on and replace the small gear that we took out a little while ago. This small gear, as you notice, has got a slot in it, and the shaft here has a small hole in it. You may not be able to see it. Position it so the slot lines up with that hole, because you're going to put the small locking pins, plastic locking pin, back into place. So, and just simply insert the clip back in like we showed a few minutes ago. The actual travel for the up and the down stroke was actually off for some unknown reason. This is the first time it's happened, but just adjust those little guys right there until the garage door stops where you want it to on the upside and just touches the garage floor on the downside. Keep an eye on the garage door travel when you're doing this. You don't want this thing to jam all the way up in there. So as you are going up, be ready to hit the stop button if the travel is set inappropriately. It's not real difficult to do. Take your time and you'll have it done in about 5 minutes, what I just did. This whole job took maybe 30 minutes, but I'm operating a camera, more like 15 or 20. Anyway, I hope this helps. Don't hesitate to comment. Thanks, folks.